thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Abigail. It's been great visiting with you up till now this morning, and
Likewise.
I'm going to talk a little bit up front, and then we'll just get into a couple of these worldview questions, and we already talked about that a little bit on the ride over. But I just thought your book was absolutely fascinating. I thought it was essentially a very targeted case study about an area of LGBTQ+, and I love the way you focused in on with kind of a laser focus on one aspect of it. I think it was beautifully written. You're obviously a gifted writer. I think it has broader implications, beyond into families and even the human movement. You could even take it as relating to that. I have done a fair amount of reading in this area. The book I will cite to you is Charles Murray's Human Diversity, about race, gender, and class, where he kind of does his typical survey of the literature in that area, And I thought your book was just totally on point with what he said. And I would say, and this is getting into being too flattering, but of the many books I've read in relating to Praxis Circle, I would put it up there with Jonathan Haidt's A Righteous Mind as, I think, a book people need to read to consider themselves educated.
Wow, thank you.
I really don't think you can even think about what's happened in, let's say, the last 3 to 5 years, particularly if you're a parent, without reading that book. And so I just want to congratulate you on all that.
It's funny to hear you say that, because when I started out with the topic, people looked at me like I was crazy. They sort of looked at why, the typical reaction was, that's such a niche issue. Why would you write a book about that? And it varied between, why don't, that's such a marginal phenomenon. Why don't you leave those people alone? Which was the reaction I got on the left. And on the right, it was much more of a, ugh, why is that something you'd write a book about? I mean, sort of, what's wrong with you? And, the reason I did was because, first of all, I had planned to write a book about sort of how young women were faring. And I came across this. A woman wrote to me, a mom, to tell me that her daughter had suddenly declared a transgender identity out of nowhere. And she was already starting testosterone. And in fact, this was happening all across the country. And I thought, well, why are so many young women trying to escape womanhood? And so it sort of fit into what I was already interested in. And it didn't seem like something I could avoid. I mean, the more I first wrote a piece about it for the Wall Street Journal, and I got permission to do that because they also, were concerned about, whether this was a real phenomenon or just a very marginal one. And they allowed me to do it, and they were very supportive. But I wrote a piece about it, and we got 1,000 responses. And it was from people all over the country telling me not only was this a phenomenon, they knew it was affecting their daughters, and they wanted to tell me about it. And then the New York Times wrote a response. Their transgender columnist, Jenny Boylan, wrote a response to it. And she got nearly 1,000 comments, and they were mostly agreeing with me. So at that point, I realized, wow, this is a genuinely big phenomenon. It's not just, originally I had thought it would just be the one article, and that's what I had planned. And that at that point, I realized this is something much bigger that's affecting the country.